amazing person. He's worked on 4 different continents. He speaks 7 languages. He co-produces TEDx Athens. He co-produces TEDx Tokyo. And he helps out with the web as well as helped us a lot with your Venture Summit. So Paul calls himself a digital futurist, and he helps a lot of companies with innovation. He has a lot of interesting thoughts, and he's going to give them to you in a very rapid fashion now. So please welcome back Paul Papadimitriou.
Let's start it. So innovation and disruption are 2 terms that are used all over, especially with the startup world. A lot of people, everybody says they're disruptive, everybody says they're innovative. I'm not going to go into the definition of innovation and disruption, but my work is to actually understand how innovation happens and how disruption happens. This is exactly what I do with big corporations. In 1994, I first had my first access to the web. And this is where basically a lot of people started saying, oh, this is a new revolution. I don't think it happened in 1994. It didn't even happen either in 1999, where actually mobile was starting to rise. A lot of people were actually starting to buy mobile phones. They were not accessing the web. Actually, I was in a startup in 1999. We were doing mobile delivery content. It was a great idea, but simply no one was actually accessing the web with a mobile phone. So it was not happening there either. In 2008, with the rise of smartphone, I was living in Tokyo back then. I started feeling that something was actually changing, but actually I believe that 2013 and 2014 are the years that things are actually starting to completely change, and I'm going to expose it for you why I think that. So what drives humans? Always is hope and fear. And businesses are actually based on the same premises. It's hope and fear. Hope and fear, of course, for businesses, slower pace than humans. So basically, innovation is about human dreaming of a better world. This is always what happens. We want more convenience and we want to have a better place. This is why you do startups, is because you want that. And this is also why businesses are doing it, even if you believe they're only about the money. It's not actually very true. So innovation is created by hope and fear. But the big thing that happened in the past 5 years, that is hope and fear has been augmented by mass networks. Of course, one of the mass networks, you think about Facebooks and etc. These are the big tipping point we've seen in the past 5 years. So the velocity and the reach of hope and fear has started to actually gain scale at a scale that is unprecedented in human history. And I will get to that a little bit later. First of all, what you have to understand is disruption is a deflation game. Basically, deflation means that prices are falling. So disruption is about falling prices. Something that used to be expensive becomes so cheap that it becomes adopted by a lot of people. This is always how innovation is actually adopted. This is what disruption means in a nutshell. Incumbents, so big companies, for instance, are addicted to large margins. This is exactly, if you think about the good example, is YouTube. Incumbents are used to large margins, and new players actually put that price so low that incumbents cannot react. This is how disruption happens. So disruption is about falling prices. Falling prices can happen for many reasons, because technological advances, because new ideas, but basically this is what you have to think. Always think about falling prices. So YouTube versus television is a very great example. A lot of people still think in the television world, and I work with some television companies, that, well, YouTube is just for the kids. Well, YouTube is not only just for the kids, they're actually eating their lunch. They're actually afraid of YouTube because it grows so fast that it actually completely destroys their business model. So what has YouTube provided is mass scale. A lot of people go on YouTube, a lot of people consume content on YouTube, a lot of people upload content on YouTube, and at a dramatically lower price. It's basically free. You can upload any type of video you want for any length you want on YouTube for free. And of course, it's ad served, but I mean, everything is free. So imagine how you would feel as if you were a manager on a television channel saying, how can we compete with that? So this is exactly the process of disruption. This is what you guys, if you're a startup, are doing. And TV producers, they are addicted to large margins. They make lower volume, but lots of margins. And the new players made a huge volume at a very, very, very small margins, even free. So again, I repeat, new entrants are dramatically lowering the price at mass scale. And mass scale is something that I will keep repeating here, and you'll understand why. So the tipping point number 1 in the industry, and that's been going on for 5 years, is this mass scale of social networks. It's something that is unprecedented in human history. That's the first tipping point. I'm going to 4 of them. Now you have to think, I don't know if you have screens to see that, the number of people online. When I was doing my startup, if you look at the screen, I was doing that around 99, 2000. There were like almost no one online. If you look at currently how many people are online, it's roughly 2 to 3 billion people are online. It's actually 2 billion. By 2020, there will be 5 billion people online. So the scale of how these networks is actually augmented simply by the number of people that actually access the web, whether it's through mobile or desktop, and I'll get to that later. A third of the world is actually already online. This is something unprecedented in human history, obviously. Facebook, as I just said here, more than 1 billion people. There's actually 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion people are actually on Facebook. YouTube has 1 billion uniques per month. It means that 1 billion people are watching us content on YouTube every month. Again, imagine if you're a TV producer, how do you compete with that? You have 1 billion people watching a piece of content on YouTube every single month. And this number is actually growing extremely fast. The other thing that has changed in the past 5 years is globalization. I just took 4 examples here. So Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Yahoo. And if you look at the chart, you actually realize that nowadays the world, so basically you not being in the US, is actually more than 80% of the accesses on these services. A good analogy is thinking about Hollywood. Hollywood used to release movies and thinking only about the US box office. Nowadays, they have to think about the international box office. It's actually where most of the money is being made, is when you have a movie like Iron Man or whichever you want. Actually, the most money is made outside of the US. So the US remains extremely important, obviously, but not as important as it used to be. And this is actually a chance for you guys, and I'll get to that as well a little bit later. So the tipping point number 2 is the mass globalization of social networks, something that is being changing again in the past 5 years. Now, revolutions. I'm not saying that, because I'm not going to make any political comment here, I'm not saying that what you're going through is a revolution, but what we're seeing a lot of movements happening in a lot of countries. You're not the only one having countries because, unhappy with the government, unhappy with the culture, unhappy with the way business is made. This is something, I keep traveling the world. Again, I've told you before, I've seen that in Brazil, I've seen that in Greece, where I'm from, although I was not born there. I've seen that in many, many, many countries. I was even in Thailand 2 weeks ago, just before the event started there as well. So this is not something unique to Ukraine. This is something you see a lot. But when you think about, for instance, the Arab Spring, a lot of people make a mistake thinking that Twitter or Facebook were the reasons why the Arab Spring was happening. Come on, let's not be delusional. I'm not going to go why it started, but if you think about this interconnected world, it just started because of the price of bread. But I'll get to that if you want over coffee later. What is important is that these networks that we've been used to in the past 5 to 10 years, again, here we're talking Facebook, Twitter, etc., have enabled these communities that didn't exist before. People can actually relate to each other in ways that was not possible before. And these networks have created a trust between people that didn't know each other, that now you can trust because you've learned how to use these networks and you learn how to gain trust with these networks. And they've also enabled transparency. A lot of people now, you can actually share information. You have access to much more information than you used to. You're forcing, including governments, to be more transparent, or you're unhappy where a government is not being transparent. So the networks have become a little bit like utilities. A network like a Facebook now can almost be considered as electricity or water. You actually need these networks in your daily life. It's something you don't see. Actually, it's something that happens with technology all the time. How many people have a washing machine here at home? Do you have a washing machine at home? Do you look at your washing machine every day? No, it's not magical anymore. Like 50 years ago, it was magical, but it's not really magical anymore. If you think about it, it's exactly what's going to happen. Social networks is already there. For you, it's not something magical anymore, something you do every day. If you think about it, your phone will be the same thing. Technologies disappear for 2 reasons. They disappear because they become obsolete, but they disappear out of our views because we're so used to it that it's part of our lives. So social networks are entered this part of disappearance. They're here. They're like air. You don't even think of them as something disruptive anymore. They're just there and they sit and you just use them. So that's why I call them utilities. So that's the tipping point number 3, the maturity of trust enabling social networks. Then you have the scale. And the scale, you have to think about the scale of mobile. I know I mentioned it earlier on in the panel we just have about mobile. I don't think people realize and understand the mass scale of mobile. It's the biggest shift in the past 50 years in terms of technology, something that has never been seen. This is a chart I've taken from a friend of mine, Benedict Evans. I encourage you to look at his website. He has a lot of good stats about mobile. But if you just look at the basic trend, and you see the sales of PCs and the sales of smartphones and tablets, and you can see how fast it's growing very, very quickly. There's something we haven't seen, how many, the scale of the sales of these devices. It's going extremely quickly. To put it another way, there will be 2 billion smartphones probably next year. At the end of next year, there will be 2 billion smartphones in the world, out of which 1 billion users will have only known on smartphones, meaning 1 billion users, because these guys especially are in emerging markets, will not have had a computer at all in their lives. Their first ever interaction with the web, with the internet, will be through a mobile phone. 1 billion people. It's huge. It's absolutely immense. And this is something that companies, trust me, I work with these corporations, are extremely afraid because they don't know how to deal with that scale. Another way to put the scale, if you look, this is the population number. You can see we're roughly 7 billion. And by 2017, and I'm sorry for the contrast here, the population will not grow too much. But if you look at the sales of mobile, especially smartphones, which is the third in this chart, the share of smartphones will rise more than double, whereas the PC will stay flat. Tablets will go by more than tripling, and mobile, because by mobile I mean non-smartphone mobile phones, will also rise. So again, another way to look at the scale and the rise of mobile. Where, if I could, yeah. Another way, and this is actually very interesting, if you just talk about the global revenue, I just took a few examples, and again, this is for Benedict Evans. The first, on the left, you see the global revenue from Facebook. Then you see online advertising. Then you see the global revenue of Apple, PCs, advertising industry in general. And the last one, this huge block you see in the last, it's mobile networks. Mobile networks are almost the number 1 trillion. It's a huge business that actually is much bigger than everything. Even Apple, the reason I put Apple here is that Apple is kind of the poster child for these mobile technologies. Because if you're an investor in stocks, in the stock market, and you want to invest your money in mobile, where do you put your money? Maybe Samsung, but Samsung does a lot of stuff. So Apple was always, this is why their stock rose so fast, because actually Apple is the poster child of mobile technology. So this is why they're so big. But look at these numbers. They're very, very, very big. Mobile is absolutely huge. And I encourage you to think about it, because this is something that 1 billion people will only have mobile. Another way to put it again, there are 20 billion SMSs exchanged daily in the world. WhatsApp is already 14 billion messages exchanged daily. So a company like WhatsApp is already reaching almost the number of SMSs sent daily. Actually, WhatsApp, I think 2-3 months ago, had a month where they had 23 billion messages exchanged. So WhatsApp, a private company in the US, actually is reaching this big standard of sending SMS. It is growing extremely fast. In 2013, these are numbers. It's impossible to know them exactly. These are only estimates. We believe there will be by the end of the year, so in a month, there will have been 5 trillion messages exchanged on WhatsApp, and I'm talking only on WhatsApp only. In 2014, that could rise to 25 trillion messages. This is absolutely, the scale is absolutely huge. And that's only one company. Then you can add the others that I'll talk about. So these are a few of the companies. I put it again just to have you have an idea. These are the actives, the mobile actives on a few social networks. I put Instagram so you can see it. Line is a very fast-growing. It's similar to WhatsApp. It's more like a social network, especially active in Japan. It's actually a Korean company. Then, of course, you have Twitter, you have WeChat, which is a very, very, very big messaging app as well, type of social networks that comes out from China. Then you have WhatsApp and Facebook. These are only mobile. Facebook is already almost at 800 million monthly uniques on mobile. These comes from the latest reports. So you can see as well here the scope. Think about what I said earlier, 1.3 billion people on Facebook, but actually most of the people now are actually using it on mobile. And this is exactly, if you think about it, Instagram is almost a mobile-only player, Line is a mobile-only player, Twitter is both, WeChat is a mobile-only player, and WhatsApp is a mobile-only player. These are the biggest ones, and they're only mobile. They're only mobile. Another way to, again, to put it, to have viewed, I really want you to understand the scale. There are 350 million pictures uploaded daily on Facebook. There are 400 million pictures uploaded daily on WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is actually already bigger than Facebook. These guys, it's not a social network yet, at least. It's just a messaging app, that's what people say. They have more pictures are uploaded every day on WhatsApp than on Facebook already. So these are mobile first and mobile only players. I mentioned Line, WeChat, Kakao Talk. These are growing to a point that they're already disrupting players that we thought would last forever. I mean, people like Facebook, services like Facebook, they're actually going much bigger. I'm not talking about revenue yet, although Line and others are making good revenue. You have to believe, you have to see how fast these guys are growing. And that's the thing. I was in Bangkok 2 weeks ago working with a lot of telcos. Telcos are huge companies with a lot of people. WhatsApp, they have these numbers, the 14 billion messages exchanged daily, the 400 million pictures exchanged daily, and they're only 45 people. It's a small company in the valley. Imagine how disruptive. This is disruptive because it changes completely the industry. You don't realize how these guys in telcos are afraid of these companies because suddenly they say, not only they didn't understand how to cope with the Facebooks and the Twitters, and then suddenly you have these new companies coming up, and these new companies are disrupting even faster. I mean, Line is adding 50 million users every month and a half. It's growing at a pace that is unprecedented, and these companies have no clue how to actually react to that. They tried, but they have failed so far. So basically, mobile-first players are disrupting everything, and this is the biggest platform shift. This is a good example, a good way to put it. If you look, these are the platform shift that happens pretty much every 15 to 20 years. You can see the web was the one before. The big blue dot is the current mobile and smartphones platform shift. But you can see the other ones were mainframe computers and PCs, then web, and obviously mobile. And this is a logarithmic scale. I couldn't put because it would have mean I would have had like a screen that was like 10 times higher than this one. But it means that basically what you have to think is that the scale of mobile is shifting everything. And this is really, and I've been in the industry in mobile for now 15 years and have never seen something like that. And you can ask anyone on any metric, it's the biggest shift ever. And that's a last way to put it, 71% of the people that know how to read and write by 2017 will actually have a smartphone in their pocket. So they will have something like that, which is actually more powerful than the computer I had 3 years ago, which is actually more powerful than the entire computing power in 1945 at the end of the war in their pockets. And 71, so basically 3/4 of the planet will have a tool like that. So imagine how it changes the game. We're talking disruption, we're talking revolutions before, how it changes the game, how it empowers people and communities if you have that kind of power with you at all times. So that's a tipping point driver number 4. It's the unprecedented explosion of mobile, this mass scale of mobile that no one could actually foresee. Then you have another thing. You have the problem with jobs. There's a lot of unemployment and underemployment happening in the past, especially since the crisis of 2008, and that matters in all countries. This is, for the first time in history, actually, it's a very different type of crisis. Even if the GDP, so basically the output of economies have risen after 2008, they've come pretty much back to the point they were, the job situation hasn't. Basically, people are still out of a job. The job recovery that used to be something, especially in the US, it's a bubble economy. I'm not going to talk about too much economics. I don't want to bore you. But the job situation hasn't actually jumped back to levels that it was pre-crisis. And this is something actually pretty new in terms of crises. The unemployment, especially youth unemployment, I've put some numbers here. So Greece is at 55%. Actually, I think it's even more now. So around 60% of people less than 25 do not have a job. In Spain, it's 53%. I think actually the right number right now would be 55. The entire EU is, like you said, 22%. Ukraine, it's an old number. I couldn't find a number for 2013 or 2012. This is a number for 2011. It's around hovering a little bit less than 20%. So you have like between a quarter to a half of the population of youth that don't have jobs, that cannot find jobs. And this is also something that will impact the world, and you'll see why and how. The last thing for jobs is in the next 10 years, there will be 1 billion women entering the workforce on the planet. 1 billion women will actually enter that were never counted because they never had jobs. They will enter the workforce. So imagine you have all these disruptions happening at the same time. You have mobile. You have the fact that we have the processing power in our pockets. You have the fact that suddenly people have not enough jobs, that actually women are entering the workforce at a much faster speed than before. And all these are shifting. This is why I think 2013 and 14 are actually extremely important for innovation. Let me try to move to the next slide. Yeah, so the new rules of global workforce economics. So now, what does it do? We had the old gatekeepers. I call gatekeepers governments, universities, lobbies, corporations, financial institutions. They all built on the old model. They all built on a model of like big margins, low volume, trying to control access to information, act as middlemen. And these old gatekeepers have a problem because they cannot sustain themselves anymore. The protectionism, this is why we see a lot of anger and we see a lot of sometimes revolution, is that because suddenly people realize that the system is not providing for the people anymore. The system is actually broken and people cannot find jobs. They actually know because now they have access to communities, they have access to other people that tell them, have you seen the situation? What do you think about it? Look at what's happening in other countries. So they have access to information and these old gatekeepers cannot keep up. And they cannot provide for the people anymore. So the top-down organization model, where you had like someone taking care of the rest, like a small group taking care of a big group, is actually starts to be broken because they just cannot keep up. And again, I visit every country. I visit a lot of emerging countries especially, but it also happens in developing countries. This system is actually more and more broken, and we see the cracks all over the place. And even like in countries like France, in the UK where I live, even in countries like Germany, we see like a lot of tensions that didn't exist before because of all this stuff I've told you before. And we see it because now we have access to information. We have access to other people. We actually also are validated in our opinion because we can talk to other people, find communities that think like us. So this is something that, again, is pushing these old gatekeepers into a corner. And this is why I think that the inadequacy of top-down organization is something that is another tipping point in 2013, 2014. So what happened next? So that's a big question. I mean, I've said all this, and it seems like it's both great and both a bit scary. So what are the next steps, according to me? First of all, I think we're seeing emerging identities. We're seeing a new kind of people being bred. I'm not talking about the youth. I'm thinking about how we see ourselves. So I think I believe, and the more I talk with people, the more I travel, the more I see people, there's a new kind of self that's being created. From top down to P2P. Again, this is exactly what I said before, the fact that you can relate to each other, you can find people with the same interests. I always use the same example. If you ever were, and I'm not asking you if, but if you ever were bullied as a kid, so if you were like the guy in the classroom that nobody liked because you had different opinions or a different lifestyle, it used to be you were alone. Now you can find people that think like you. You can actually validate, say, you know what, actually, if I think differently, it's okay, because actually in the world, there are other people that think like me, and I can find them through these social networks. Again, the mass scale of social networks. And I can find them because I have a phone in my pocket. So it validates beliefs. It validates the process of believing and validating beliefs is much faster, has a bigger reach than ever before. So it allows people to think, you know what, I'm not going to conform to whatever reality top-down organizations want me to conform. I know that when I speak like that, some people think I'm calling for revolution. It's not what I'm doing. I'm just seeing it happening. I see more and more people actually having new type of beliefs, and these new type of beliefs have found similar ones in very different parts of the planet. It's not that cultures still matter, but there are new selves. I'm going to go quickly. Tribalism. People actually want a different type of living, especially in the startup world. You say people, home is considered very differently. Why should I stay in one village? I could be anywhere, but that's a choice you can have. As long as you have internet, you can actually work from wherever you want. You can actually move much easily. I know it's still not the case. You still need visas. But more and more I'm seeing this exchange that didn't happen before, especially again in the early adopter crowd, especially in the startup world. So you have new groups that are being created. I call that tribalism. Then you have nomadism, again, the mobility, people actually moving quickly. I see a lot of startup accelerators. You have people from all over the world. I go to startup accelerators in Europe, and you have people from the US, from South America, from Asia, and I go in the US, you have people from Palestine to Antarctica. I mean, it's insane. This movement of people is something that I've been seeing, especially in the past 5 years, 2009, it's been growing at a pace that is incredible. So that's another scale. And singularism, that's what I said, you can actually define your own beliefs, and you don't need actually to conform to a belief, especially in societies or in cultures. You can have another type of belief. This creates new identities. But the new identity is also new consumers, and this is what you guys are doing. When you want to reach a consumer, you have to understand these consumers. This is why I'm telling you this, because the consumers are acting very differently from what they used to act. And this is, again, something that big corporations have a hard time grasping sometimes, because they see that consumers are acting very differently, and that the way they're acting, consumer behavior is changing much faster than it used to, because it's not as easy as it used to be to just define, segmentation via personas or via target groups. They're seeing a lot different type of user behavior, consumer behavior, because of these factors I've mentioned. So basically, I'm going to go faster because I'm running out of time. But what the consumers are looking for are these, especially the first word, meaning, engagement, convenience, and personalization. This is something that in every industry, new types of consumers, because they've been hit by all these factors I've been telling you, are looking especially meaning, but engagement, convenience, and personalization. If this is something in every strategy, consumer strategy you do, whether you're a small company or a big company, these are the 4 keywords you have to look at if you want to talk to these new customers, hence these new identities. Especially, people are not defined by things anymore. It used to be like people wanted to have a car, a dog, the Volvo, the big house, a big TV, and a dog to go with it. Now people less and less people want to buy things. They want to actually have access to experiences. So they're not buying cars anymore, for instance. They want to have access to experiences. So it's like the experience that matters. I love the fact that I can drive an Aston Martin. For instance, that's my favorite car. I don't own one, trust me. But not the fact that they buy it. Because they don't need to be defined by the things. They need to be defined by the fact that the experiences. Think about travel. When you go traveling, you don't own, it's an experience. More and more part of life are defined by experiences. You want to actually have experiences. The way that consumers are putting their money in stuff they want to do, it's not about buying something. It's about accessing the experience. So buying the key to the experience. Let's get a little bit faster. So this creates the emerging model. So of course we've seen the Twitter, the Facebook, etc. But what is important is that the transparency and openness and the trust that these networks have enabled us to do actually has created new types of business models. And first of all, there's global human capital. I don't know if you know about Odesk or Elance. Basically, you could go there and you can find people doing odd jobs or doing like you need a developer, you need whatever you need. You can actually go on these networks and find people and trust people that are there. And then if you want to offer your services, you can also register on these type of networks. And I think these networks are becoming bigger and bigger because again, the notion of jobs. Think about the fact that people have no jobs defined by the old way of defining a job. So new ways of defining a job are much more flexible, and this is what these models actually actually emerging very fast because people need, of course, to still pay the bills or want to access more experiences, want the money that go with it. Thus, these models, these platforms that allow people to connect to each other with a purpose of delivering services or buying services are going very fast. So one is the global human capital. Of course, the marketplaces, and I put the traditional examples here, Airbnb, relay rides. Relay ride is the fact you have a car. 90%, if you have a car, to come back to my example of buying a car, 90% of the time the car sits in front in a street. It is not used. So instead of that with relay ride and other services now that I've seen spotted around the world, you actually rent your car for a block of 1 hour, half an hour, 2 hours. So you buy something if you have a car, but you actually rent it out. If you think a little bit, what that means is that as a car maker, you're going to send less cars because if I have 90% non-occupancy of my car, I can find, to put it very simply because it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I can find 9 people that will use it for 10%. So actually, instead of selling 10 cars like they used to, they only sell 1. And of course, when I'm choosing the car I want to buy, I want a car that is robust because I want a car that I can actually share and rent to you guys. So this changes the game for a lot of these companies. And this is, I think, what startups should be. When people ask you what kind of startups are very, very excited about, are these startups that enable these peer-to-peer marketplaces. AngelList, of course, Cookiestos, it's a Greek startup that does, people can become their own cook and actually sell their food to all their neighbors and other people. I mean, it's all these play of like, instead of using a middleman, although these platforms become type of middleman, obviously, but you actually go into peer-to-peer marketplaces. And this is one of the biggest thing happening. So, and then you have nodes as well. So I want to mention that. The reason I'm going to quickly over it is because a lot of people complain, especially in emerging markets, like, yeah, but we're not in the Silicon Valley. Yeah, we're not in a big city. Yeah, we don't have access to a lot of stuff, blah, blah, blah. I know. But actually, where cities are the center of innovation, there's actually a concept called superlinearity. If you're in a city, like the spread of a virus, sorry, it's not very funny, but the spread of a virus go much faster in a city than it goes in a country level. But the same thing goes for innovation. The spread of innovation, the spread of ideas, the sharing of ideas, and the execution of ideas go much faster in a city than it goes in a rural area, obviously, or in a country at all. But the internet is actually becoming the city. This is what is interesting. You don't need to be in a city anymore to have access to this kind of fast spread. You can be living in a small village in Ukraine. As long, again, of course, you have the infrastructure, which is the internet, you can actually make it. And I've seen a lot of examples of people living in islands and still having like great business models. They don't need to live in New York, San Francisco. I don't think people would consider that a very big city, but San Francisco, London, or Singapore and Tokyo. You can actually have differentiated living. So all this goes together, again, with the fact that you can choose a life that is different because you can actually have access to these kind of innovation processes outside of big cities. So let me go a little bit faster. And finally, emerging markets. Remember I told you incumbents are addicted to large margins, TV versus YouTube. The other thing is, since I work a lot with emerging markets, and we are in an emerging market here, is that if you think about emerging markets versus industrialized or developing nations, it's exactly the same thing. Emerging markets provide mass scale, so you type of market provide mass scale at a lower price. And this is exactly what startups are doing to like incumbents. So basically you have to think Ukraine as a startup. Ukraine is a startup because you actually provide lower price, a faster innovation that the big countries are. Why? Because we're used to, we're incumbents. We have it always good. Sorry, if I could go. We are, like I say, because I was born in an industrialized country. I was born in Switzerland. We are addicted to, a lot of stuff that is part of an incumbent type of mentality. Everything works, and we have it too good for too long time. And now the emerging markets actually pushing us. They're actually making us incumbents. Like, again, to think YouTube versus television. You are YouTube, the industrialized world is television. And we're being disrupted by emerging markets because we always had the resources, the money, we always had the capital, and now it's actually changing very, very fast. So you have to think yourself, you have to stop thinking emerging markets as being like a lower type of markets. Actually, emerging markets are becoming the startups of this world, and emerging markets are disrupting the West and I call that the West. I know it's not always the proper term, but the West very, very quickly. And this is also why there are jobs problems in the West, etc., etc., etc. Let's go a little bit faster, because the other thing I wanted to say is that as emerging markets, you have to create new models, and you keep creating new models that we can't create in the West. And one of the things I want to point out here is the ID replication. I see a lot of people thinking that making copies as a startup is a bad thing. This is a temple that's right in the middle of Seoul in South Korea. That temple actually burned to the ground a few years ago, and they rebuilt it completely. And I say we here because there's a similar thing that happens in all Europe especially. If something is burned down, we're like, this is not the original. I want to see the original church or the original building. I don't want to see a copy. But actually, in most Asian markets, they don't care. This is still, for them, the original. Even though the thing burned down because it was made of wood, it's still the thing they want to see. Meaning that for me, copying an ID, for me, it's not a bad thing. Actually, it's a good thing. If you think about it, one of the things that a lot of startup advisors will tell you, investors, is like, it's always about the ID versus execution. That's the idea. If you have an idea, even if it's a copy, if you execute it better, and especially in an emerging market, just do it. There's no shame. I think it's even crazy to hate copies. Basically, you have to adapt to the fact that you have limited resources. And another thing that you have to think about is, again, if you look at, you probably not cannot read it, but basically, emerging markets have always produced products that were simple, that were robust, and that were cheap. But actually, when you think about it, what are startups doing? Simple, robust, and cheap. This is all how the startups are actually making a success. It's because you're finding models that are simple, robust, and cheap. So basically, again, emerging markets have always done what startups are looking to do today. So you have all the right keys in a country like Ukraine to actually disrupt both markets or countries like the West. What I want to try to point out here is that there's no shame at all, and even it's an advantage, and I call that the emerging market advantage, to be in an emerging market. It's actually a better solution. You have no choice, so you're gonna ideate faster and better than probably most other markets I'm coming from. Let's go quickly to the end because I'm running out of time. Sorry guys for that. So here you go. So you have to think, and I'm finished with that, the internet is like, again, a global and free agora. The agora was in ancient Greece, was that place where people would exchange IDs and products. It's a marketplace, but a marketplace for IDs and a marketplace for services and products. This is how you should see the internet. You should stop thinking about boundaries, national boundaries, language boundaries, culture boundaries. Actually, most of the best innovation, especially in startups I'm seeing, is actually against, despite of conditions and not because of conditions. When you think about it, everybody thinks about Silicon Valley because the Silicon Valley is this great thing, but actually most of the ecosystems I travel with, they have problem with their government, they have problem with their language, or supposedly so they see it as a problem. They see problem with their culture because they're not an entrepreneurial culture. They see problem with their access to capital, etc., etc., etc. A good friend of mine that I interviewed last week in Athens has created an accelerator out of Beirut in Lebanon. There are bombings, there are kidnappings, the Syria is falling down. I mean, they don't have it very good there, right? We're not talking only about a crisis, we're talking about almost a state of war. Well, in 1 year, the accelerator was able to put out 3 exits. So when I hear ecosystems that tell me, yeah, it's not possible, we cannot be the Silicon Valley, this is, sorry, BS. A lot of systems prove that even if you have no good access capital, that the government is not providing a right framework, etc., etc., you can make it. And emerging markets, and I keep repeating it, emerging markets have a unique chance because of all the factors I've been telling you before to actually completely prove me right, but also actually disprove all the Western model that we've been used to in the past 50 years. So to finish with one sentence, I'm just going to say that it's coming up. It's up to you to liberate these ideas and disrupt yourself. Disrupt your country, yourself, and then that's how you're going to make it big. Thank you very much.